Facebook page as well. But when we go to one-to-one questions, I'll turn that off. So those questions are just for you guys. All right, so let me go ahead and get us started with this morning's webinar. I am Susan Cabani. I am the co-founder and CEO of Eugenie, and Eugenie is a private platform for online communities and memberships. And so when I put together this webinar series and this particular webinar, it's taking to get all of my experience and digital expertise. I'm a digital strategist as well, but also taking the best practices from the communities that are using Eugenie, from memberships to social communities, kind of bringing together the best practices for a lot of these various different communities. And the one thing that I saw across all of them is that a lot of the principles that may apply to an online membership also apply to building a social community or a Facebook group. So a lot of these tips applied no matter what technology you choose to use. And we are going to talk a little bit about the various options that you have out there. A quick little bit of the agenda. So in terms of if you have any questions or any specific challenges you'd like me to address, please do feel free to put them into the chat. I'll glance at that every so often, but I will be more focused on giving you guys the tips, and then you can schedule that one-to-one with me if you'd like to afterwards. We'll then go into our top tips and a bit of Q&A if there's time. I've already introduced Eugenie a little bit, but we are being used by lots of different types of communities, and also expanding our technology quite a lot at the moment to go web-based and add more function in our admin dashboard. So there's 3 pieces of Eugenie technology. There's 2 web-facing portals, which is one is web and one is app. And then there's the admin tool that allows you to add members, add content, and analyze your engagement. So let's jump into the actual meat of the webinar. The first thing in any of our webinars or any of the work that I do on digital strategy for any customers or communities is that it's all about the strategy. Technology itself cannot determine the success of your online initiative. You know, whether you hear people will say, oh, you know, I'm using Facebook and it's not working, or I'm using Slack and people are not talking back. The platform only has so much to do with whether people are going to engage with you or not. Now, that being said, you also want to take a look at your community when we start looking at the first few tips, who they are, what kind of content do you want to share with them? What are your objectives for the long term? A lot of these things, your strategy, are really going to determine not only what technology you use, but whether you're using that technology in a way that is going to create an engaged community. We do quite a lot of work with our own customers as well, in terms of before we even invite people to the membership or the online community, we do quite a lot of work in testing and making sure that the strategy is there and ready and set up for success. And also, one of the questions I like to ask is, how many of you know the difference between an audience and an online community? Now, a lot of us probably have an audience today. They might be small audiences. You know, if we have a Facebook page, a Facebook account, Instagram, LinkedIn, probably most of us that have any of these accounts have some sort of audience, whether that's a couple of hundred people or a couple of million. The difference between an audience and a community is, the test is, if your online community would continue to exist without you, without your content, or without your incentives. Sorry, it's one of those things from working from home. I thought I just heard the door slam. But would your online community work without you, without your content, without your incentives? And if that's not the case, then most likely you have an audience and you haven't gotten to having that online community yet. So if we look at the tools for building an audience versus the tools needed for an online engaged community, everything that you need for an audience, you also need for community. So the listening, the engagement, the posting of the relevant content, loyalty points. There's a lot of these things that we do need when we're building an online community. But for an online community, we need even more than that. We need to have, we're doing special things for our online community, whether it's naming the group differently, having specific bespoke events for them, having insider jargon or symbols. Essentially, we're trying to develop that shared narrative and have values that are the same. Communities that share values are very sticky because you find people in these communities that you have a lot in common with. And a lot of times when we're building that peer-to-peer community, we're looking for other people in the community with whom we can chat, talk, or support. And so that's that whole idea of building consensus building. So let's jump into the tips of what might take your audience into an actual engaged online community. And this is just a quick little snapshot. I do another webinar on converting social media contacts into your highly engaged ambassadors. But tip 1 will always be defining the objectives and goals of your community. So looking at why it is that you want to build your community or your membership, and understanding what the objectives are for you as a business, but also what you want them to achieve in the membership. So do you want, as a goal of your membership, to be, Eugenie is launching a membership for people who run memberships. One of our goals is to make sure that our members have a certain amount of retention in their communities. And that's something I can track. So, there's a lot, we can have high level goals, but a lot of times we want these goals to be objective goals, SMART goals, things that we can say, look, I want to onboard X number of members and I want to keep X number of members. And this is going to help me. And this is part of when we talk about KPIs and metrics, but really understanding what your objectives and goals are and writing them in a way where they can be tracked. Because when you can track something, you can then understand why something maybe isn't happening, why you haven't been able to hit an objective, why one of your goals wasn't successful. But understanding these objectives and goals are going to help you with setting up the strategy as we jump into tip number 2. The other thing is joining other communities who may fill this need, observe and learn. And so this is, in essence, competitive research, right? We're trying to figure out who else in the market may be trying to fulfill the need or the objective that we are trying to fulfill. Now, there are a lot of communities out there, a lot of memberships. It's a very competitive space, especially now with a lot of the world now being more online. But ultimately, we want to be going into these other groups so that we can see what is the key pain point that our potential customers are facing. So again, if I'm looking at people, building a membership for people who run memberships, then I can join Facebook groups where people are in there to learn more about memberships. I can look at the questions that they're asking. What are they struggling with? What kind of pain point can I help them overcome that maybe isn't being addressed in the community that they're in? Now, this isn't about going in and poaching people. I'm not going in there and saying, come and work with us, we're better. But it's about understanding more that problem that your member might be facing or your potential community member is that you can also address. Tip 3, identifying your ideal member or client so you can attract the right type of people and create the right relevant content. Ultimately, let's take an example. It's always easiest to talk about this on an example. So let's say you're building a communities for dads in business. So you want to attract dads who are in business. Now you might also take that one step further and say you want dads who are running small businesses, at-home businesses, local businesses. You can define that as much as you want, and actually defining that in that much detail then allows you to attract your members in the marketing funnels more easily. But essentially you want to attract and identify the ideal member so that you can attract the right people and then also create the right content. So if I'm creating a community for dads in business, and then I get a bunch of moms joining it, even if it's just moms in business, there might be a lot of content in there that I've made specifically for a dad and not for a mom. And ultimately, then that content is not going to be relevant for the moms, or let's say someone who doesn't have any children. All of a sudden, I've spent all this time and money to attract this person, to have them join my community, wherever that might be hosted. But I'm adding content that is relevant to them. And that quickly becomes noise. You then lose that person. And when we look at marketing funnels, even if we're running free communities or memberships today, it takes quite a lot of time and energy and paid ads a lot of the time if you want to have quite a large community to get the right people into it or get people into it in general. So if we're not getting the right people, if we're not attracting the right people and then giving them the right content, it's going to be quite a lot of waste of time and you're going to have a lot of attrition for your community. And if we look at marketing, customers really want to feel like you're talking directly to them. Everywhere you go, it's about personalizing and curating your messaging. Companies can't use a one-size-fits-all approach to marketing, engagement, and or retention anymore. And I think the biggest part of this is that selling doesn't stop once someone has joined your community, and whether that's a social community or not, you still need to be delivering some sort of value because people can jump to another even church or another mom's group. So it doesn't matter what the purpose of the group is. You still want to be putting really valuable and specific relevant content into your membership, your group, to make sure that people stay. Tip 4. Create a name, look, feel that represents the brand, but is unique to your community. So, I'm going to go into an example. It's always the best way to describe it. We have a community that is run by Piyush Patel, who is a Federation of Small Businesses advisor. Here's just a completely side tip. Check that out. If you're not a member of the FSB already, some great benefits for your business. But ultimately, Piyush has created an additional community for the people that he works with within the FSB as a value add, as a place outside of social media for them to come together, access the member directory, the calendar, find out where Piyush is going to network, so charismatic. But he's called this community the family. So he's not called it, the FSB family or FSB West London, whichever it is that he could call because of his objective jurisdiction. But he's called it the family to create that kind of loyalty and that additional sense of belonging that he can create with this family. He's also been doing specific bespoke events that are only for family members, specific offers and of services and things that, again, only his family can benefit from. So it's creating that additional sense of belonging and loyalty by using the family versus using something like FSB. Tip 5. Now, there's a lot of platforms out there right now. We've got the main 4, the Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. And, even on Twitter, you can build a community. It looks very different than what you do on Facebook. But choosing the right platform is also going to help you set up for success. Now, it's also about looking at your short-term versus long-term goals, as we talked about in tip 1. If your community is always only going to be, let's say, 10 people, you want to coach 10 women and you need to work with them one-to-one, you may not need a Facebook group. You may not need a WhatsApp. I mean, maybe WhatsApp is the right place if they're all happy to be in a small group of 10. But if you want your community to grow into 10, 1,000 people, 10,000 people, where you need subgroups and different hashtags and various functionality, it's looking at the right platform, not only for now, but also for the future. Now, we're going to go into some of the tips of how you can choose the right platform. And I know budget can be quite an important factor on which platform you choose, with a lot of platforms at the moment, some of the big 4 being free. But ultimately, we need to look at the budget and how much it does cost to understand that. I would also say, though, at the moment you may say, let me grab a free platform and build my community on there. Transitioning people from one platform to another can also be quite difficult, right? You work quite a lot, put a lot of energy, let's say, into building an engaged WhatsApp group. And then you tell people, well, actually, WhatsApp doesn't do X, Y, and Z. So we're moving our community to another platform. If you can, I always think it's good to start your community where you'd like it to be long-term. And if you don't know what that is, then obviously, reach out to me. I know quite a lot of platforms that aren't ours, that aren't the kind of big social media platforms. More than happy to help guide you guys on what the right platform might be for you. Is the platform easy to access? Is there a single sign-on? Is it part of an app that the individual is already using? This is probably one of the biggest reasons people use Facebook, is because most of the world is on Facebook. Well, a lot of people are leaving Facebook. So, if you're a big Facebooker, please don't be surprised that there is a growing trend away from Facebook, and make sure you're setting yourself up to be ready for that. But ultimately, one of the things that we were hearing quite a lot was, Susan, we know we've got our the app community on Eugenie, but people really want to be on web. They want to do a lot of this connecting on web. Can you build us a web platform? So we've now built that as well. So looking at where is the platform providing you the technology for where your customers want to be. If they all want an app, well, then of course you want that app-based platform. But if a lot of them are more web-based users, it's important to look at that. Does the platform allow you to share content easily and interact with other community members? Now, a quick tip on content sharing: you might have some content you're happy that for people to share in big numbers. You want them to share in other Facebook groups. You want them to share it on LinkedIn. You also might be one of our various clients who's a coach or membership organization where only premium content is being shared with their paid members, and you don't want to share that, right? So, for example, we built a Vimeo integration so that people can put on Vimeo videos that can't be shared. That's because people are paying for that content and they don't want that to be shared. So again, take a look at how easy is this to share the content, and do you want it to be shared? Does your platform allow for push notifications? This is all based on the mobile world that we're living in. I know at the moment we're on COVID and everyone's at home on their laptops, but generally we will go back to a world in which our mobile phones will still be a big part of how we're consuming content. Can you customize the platform to your logo, your colors, your liking, groups, hashtags? How much customization can you do and how much do you want? And again, what kind of integrations does the platform have? What's important to you? Most of the things that people ask us is CRM or MailerLite integration. And recently we just added a way to email from the Eugenie admin dashboard. So we're working toward creating an all-in-one solution, but we don't have all the integrations, making us not right for everyone. Tip number 6 is creating a content plan that is based on your channels and that fosters engagement. So again, I've put this as later on in the strategy, because once you've identified what you want to achieve, how big you want it to get, what the purpose is, and you identify your ideal client, also looking at where they would like to be, then you choose your platform, and then you look at, well, what type of content could actually be best suited for this particular platform? What is going to engage content, right? On Facebook, some of those strategies are very different than what's going to happen on LinkedIn versus Twitter. And ultimately, you do want to take a look at all of those factors before creating that content plan. You know, on Facebook, you might need to do a lot more posting to make sure that your messaging gets through. You may need to do, on Twitter, again, having which hashtags are we going to use to make sure that people can see this. Even on Eugenie, we're taking a look at, are we posting into our premium groups, our free groups? A lot of our communities have multiple groups. And so how can we create content that actually is the right type of content? I think the other biggest question I always get is, well, how much content is enough, right? Do we need to put a lot of content into our community to be able to demonstrate value, let's say for a paid community? And I don't think the number of pieces of content actually demonstrate to your member that this is valuable. It may be that your community is really, really happy just to show up for the once a month Zoom, and that's what they're coming for. Or they're actually coming for looking for the member directory so they can connect with other people. But if that's the case, once you understand all those things, you can then support that with your content strategy. So if it is all about the Zoom and you want to put the Zoom as a replay so other people can watch it in case they've missed it, or it's all about the connections between the community, well, featuring members and leading people back to your member directory to make sure that they all see that can be quite important. So looking at that and making sure that also you're looking at the platform itself. WhatsApp is one of the tools a lot of people are now using to create small group and community. However, WhatsApp doesn't allow you to share historical stuff with people who have joined the community later. So if you're constantly having to reshare old content because you've got new members in your group, well, one, they're not going to be able to see all the old stuff and not be able to value that. But also, the existing members may not like the fact that you have to keep reposting things. That's just one of the things that I've heard is a challenge. And the other thing is, I spoke to a potential community the other day. They're saying, we've got about 60 people in there, but no one's talking. And so with WhatsApp as well, one of the things you probably want to look for is going in and looking at the messages and seeing who's actually reading them. It'll give you an idea of whether you've been put on mute or, what kind of engagement. It might just be that there's a lot of communities and people are reading content and they are engaging in that way, but they're just not talking yet. So again, defining what engagement means to you and creating content and a strategy that fosters what's important to you. Tip 7, staying organized. Staying organized in an online world is really important because everything is so, we have so much access to so much digitally, email, social media, our other apps. There's so much going on for our end users. We need to also have a plan so that we can also do one of the things that comes in one of the later tips, which is responding quickly, monitoring your channels and responding quickly. If you can stay organized and create your content plan, get it scheduled, get it to go out so that you can focus on the day-to-day engagement, that will help. But also staying organized so that you're looking at the feedback and looking at the behavior, tracking your progress of what's going on with all your different content, making sure that you're measuring what people are looking at will really help you with the online digital world. Otherwise, what happens is I get quite a lot of, oh my God, I forgot to post yesterday. I just got so caught up in what I was doing and my post for yesterday didn't go out. So tip here as well is trying to keep your content planned for a few months at a time and get it scheduled if you can. A lot of platforms allow you to do that. Facebook, you can do it natively. You can have something like Hootsuite or Buffer. Eugenie has a native one. So just making sure that you can do that. Some other tips in staying organized on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis is, on a daily basis, you want to respond to your groups and comments. So making some time in your daily schedule to make sure that you are there present, especially in the early days when you're probably the one that's fostering most of the conversation. You want to respond to any direct messages or emails, because if you don't, then people will be discouraged from messaging and posting again, right? It takes some time for people to post in the first instance. So we want to make sure that if another member hasn't done it, that we jump in there as the leader of the community. And I've already talked a little bit about the weekly and monthly. I want to make sure that we cover all the tips and leave a little bit of time for questions, but scheduling all your communications, looking at the metrics, still checking in on your, the other communities that are trying to serve your niche and understanding what's going on in there. Are there any trending topics? Do you need to tweak your content in any way? Creating some personal content. And a lot of times people are running online communities or memberships in an area where they're an expert. So share that, share your expertise, make yourself visible in the fact that you know what you're talking about. And that can also be great to create content that will attract new members as well. So some of your content from a content perspective can be different levels, where you might do a 50-minute video, for example, for your paid members or people inside your community. Maybe take 10 minutes of that and share it on social media to kind of show and demonstrate that value. So using the same piece of content and repurposing it. Content is hard. It's one of the biggest things that we hear as a challenge for people who run memberships in communities, online communities, is how much content that they need to create. And there's so many aspects involving in building a membership and running a community that sometimes if we don't have the content ready, it can fall behind. And then monthly, you want to make sure that you're, communicating. It might be that you're doing some cross-platform communication. So, once a month, you might also be sending that newsletter or doing a Zoom call. So it might not all be about living in the Facebook group or the LinkedIn group or the Eugenie group. It's something you're sending outside in an external form. Tip 8, creating a marketing funnel which leads your prospective members to your home base. Now, changing behavior, just because I think I mentioned earlier, is just because someone has signed up or become a member of your community doesn't mean that they're always, especially early on when they're still learning about using a new platform or coming to a new Facebook group, they need to be led back. They need to be led back to your group. And this is where sometimes email can help, text messaging, push notifications, or even in your own email signature, always including, don't forget to come and check out what's going on in our community, our Facebook group, our LinkedIn. And a lot of our customers are doing that. They'll put it into their kind of email signature to make sure that people can very easily come back. We have other customers that are linking on their websites to sign in and log in button for their members. So making it really easy for your community members to be able to come back to your home base. I've talked a little bit about this already. So setting your success metrics, and let's just jump into what that means a little bit. So how many new members join the community each week, each month? Again, what are your goals? How many do you need? Especially as you then have the community for a period of time or your membership. If you're having a certain amount of members leaving, you need to replenish the new ones, but also focusing on why are people leaving? Why, what value am I not delivering? Why are people not just not engaging, but actually physically leaving the community? Are new members actively participating? And do they feel that there is content in there that is beneficial and is relevant? I definitely would do a new member check-in, within a week or two of someone signing up or joining. Is how are you doing? Are you finding the content relevant? Doing that one-to-one in the early days has shown that they will stay in the community for a longer period of time. What content has the most engagement? So whether you're measuring that with likes, upvotes, or comments, just a tip on social media, likes don't mean that much anymore. The algorithms are valuing commenting, and even if you share a post, if you add a little bit about the post in your new post, it will also be ranked higher than just sharing someone's post. So giving a little bit of, I'm sharing this post because, will help the person who you're sharing in the first place, but also your own organic reach. The content that has the lowest amount of engagement, content as hard as we've spoken about. So if there's a topic or a type of content that no one's looking at, well, don't waste your time building it, right? Or look at why. Is it that people want that content topic, but they want it in video form versus in a checklist? Or actually they don't want to watch a 30-minute video. So a lot of this is looking and tracking, making sure your platform allows you to do that, but also talking to your community members and making sure that you are touching base with them to get some feedback. Creating and introducing guidelines. And so with online communities especially, we cannot be there 24/7. So we want to have a sense, some guidelines, some rules, some kind of rules of conduct that you might want. And I'll give you an example of this as our last tip. I will for those of you that have attended and registered, you'll get another 10 tips the rest of the presentation. But in terms of looking at just how to use the platform. So rules on, what is the best practice to use Slack, for example. Slack, which is a remote communication tool for teams. I use it for my team of developers. I won't join other Slack channels because that's the one channel I want to keep clean for my own team. But ultimately in Slack, you want to organize it by Slack into channels. So each one has a purpose. So you don't have people talking in the marketing channel when it's a finance question. But also things like, not bloating the channel where someone will come in the morning and say, hey, enter, how are you, enter. And it becomes multiple messages that are then everyone's getting notified about. Using threads as well, so responding to someone. So Slack can be a great tool for teams and because of its setup, but it doesn't do everything. So making sure that it does connect to the other platform, other things that you need, Google Drive and that sort of thing. And also even just putting up a do not disturb when you as a user cannot be at your desk. And so other people will know that you're not there at the moment. One of the greatest things in terms of a WhatsApp group that I was a part of, it just reopened. We're all out now in the real world again as of the 4th of July. But ultimately, they are a group that was all about connecting in real life. So people were saying, hey, I'm meeting at such and such place at this time. If anyone would like to come, DM me or meet me there. And when lockdown started, the purpose of this group, which is meeting in real life, was no longer relevant for a period of time. I thought it was amazing that the leadership shut it down for a while, they just put the group in lockdown. Because, you know, WhatsApp, you can love it, you can hate it. A lot of people are using it for so many various things, but it can get quite annoying with all the notifications, especially if you have large groups. I mean, this group is always full. It's 256 people. So if you have people having one-to-one conversations and are not relevant to the rest of the community, well, ultimately, you're going to have people leave or mute you, which means that they're missing the important content you're sharing. So I thought it was really great that the leaders did that. So with that, that is our final tip that we're going to cover today in the webinar. I'm going to go ahead and stop our live on Facebook, and I'm just going to see if you guys have any questions in our chats. If you have any questions, you can feel free to ask me them now, or